Hey everybody, just wanted to give you a quick note on how this episode is going to work. I was very lucky to get an interview with Bob and Paul from Mythos. Really cool guys, have been a huge influence on me as a fan of music and as a musician as well, considering I write a lot of music in their genre. But what I was going to do originally was just do a review of Reality of a Dreamer, my favorite album by them. And then I reached out to them and it turned into this interview. And so I'm just going to air them separately. So today I'll be airing the interview, and then tomorrow on the show I'll be doing a bonus episode where I do my regular album review of Reality of a Dreamer. So enjoy, guys. There also will be a couple of bonus songs in the review as well. So enjoy this interview with Bob and Paul from Mythos. Welcome to another episode of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I have a special treat for you guys today. I've been wanting to do a review of the album Reality of a Dreamer for a long time. I specifically wanted to do it around this time of year, and we'll get into that, but I didn't expect that I was going to be able to talk to the band themselves about this album. Here we have from Mythos, Bob Deeth and Paul Schmidt. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. It's great to be talking to you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to finally meet you guys after years of spending so much time with your music. I'll give you the quick background. I used to go to a New Age store in Phoenix when I lived there, and they used to have a display for some of their top albums, and you could just plug headphones in and listen to samples of the songs. And Reality of a Dreamer was one of those. And I listened to it. I immediately bought it, took it home, fell in love with every single song. But it was right around this time of year that happened. So for me, we would play it at my family Thanksgiving, which is in November for us here in the States. And then for our Christmas party, it was an album that was on heavy rotation. So to me, I'll listen to it all year, but it really kind of kicks in around this time of year where it's like, I really want to hear this album. You guys have been at this for a long time, 25 years now. How does it feel to still be working together and be a band that stayed together when so many bands can't make it past a couple of years? Well, I'll start with you, Bob.
Yeah, sure. Paul's like my brother. So, I mean, it's like family, right? So, I mean, you know, we when we started working together, it was kind of like literally turning the faucet on. That's the way our creative process has been. And it's been like that for 25 years. So whenever we get together, it's always a joy and when it's a joy, why would you stop doing that? So we always just wanted to create beautiful music. We never had any boundaries or genre per se, and just so you know, as you can hear from the music, it pulls from all sorts of genres, from all over the world, and so we've really enjoyed that. And of course, you know, Paul is an accomplished classical acoustic guitar player and studied classically, so having that sort of level of talent in the group it's really awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very finely tuned player, I will say. How about you, Paul? How do you feel knowing that this has been such a huge part of your life?
Well, like Bob said, it's like family, because I met Bob because I was in high school. Bob's younger brother, Paul, another Paul, was like pretty much my best friend. And we played music together. And then Bob's dad just really wanted Bob and I to get together, even though Bob was like he was like about 6 or 7 years older than me, I think. Well, still is, of course. But he was in a band called Rhymes with Orange at that point, and they were actually doing quite well. And then that kind of like stopped. And then Bob's dad really was pushing, because Bob had classical and jazz training, and I had a lot of classical training. So Bob's dad was really pushing us to get together, and we finally did. And it was like, it was like very synergistic for sure. And so it just like, they're like almost like my, you know, when I went to England, I hung out with Bob's mom all the time and stayed at her place and stuff. And like, so it does feel like family for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly after all this time, you guys grow together as friends and musicians and really family. I mean, a band becomes a family, even if it's just two people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is nice that there's two of us. I've been in groups that are 5 or 6, and I have to say managing like that many people gets hard over time. So I think having a duo like this, and instead of sort of growing the band, we had the opportunity to bring in amazing guest performers over the years, and we've just had this incredible opportunity to work with some amazing artists who always bring the level of the project up. And so it's great for us because we have this core with Paul and me, and then we get to work with these amazing guest artists as well.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, like for example, in Reality of a Dreamer, we had Mark Hensley working with us on that album as an engineer, and he did. I think he mixed it. And, he's since won an Emmy, I think, for his he did the sound design for that show called Einstein, I think, that Netflix series. Mm-hmm. Do you know Bob was an Emmy he won? I think it was an Emmy award.
Yeah.
He won for that. So super amazing to have, like, he was living in Vancouver at the time. He lives in LA now, but it was like, we've had a lot of people like him that have been really like, helped us out a lot and been, very talented people to we've worked with. So,
and I have to say the production on all of your albums is top notch. And you guys really started doing this when New Age was a category, but it wasn't a huge category. So it was kind of like, when heavy rock became a thing, engineers didn't really know how to mix it. They're like, I think this would work, or I think this would sound good. And you guys were at the beginning of this, but every single one of your albums from the first album on has had a fantastic sound to it. Every song is rich and full, even if it's just 2 guitar tracks. It's so consistent from the beginning. How did you come to get to that point so quickly?
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because again, we've had some incredible people work with us, like Sean Pierce, for example, who's now a top film composer in LA, or we've always had really, really good people around us as well. And it was interesting at the beginning because Paul and I really didn't set out to create Mythos. We actually we're trying to do some demos for film and television because we thought that we might be able to do some scoring, and so we were trying to put some demos together. And it was only then when we started creating pieces as these projects that we realized, oh man, there's something here. There's something here, right? And it was quite funny because Paul said, well, because there was a few things on the radio that were starting to happen in this area, like Robert Miles. I don't know if you remember him. It was like that. And there was like instrumental tracks getting onto hit radio, and we're like, oh man. And so we put one of our first EP out, and sure enough, the November became a hit in Canada. It was like, what? There's no lyrics. Yeah. There's no lyrics, right? So, but yeah, so we really were trying to create these sort of lush soundscapes in a sense as well. So the production, that's part of the reason why the production has that sort of lush sound to it is we were setting out at the beginning. And so because that worked so well, we've sort of stayed with that. And I know a lot of new producers really going for lo-fi and stuff like that. And we've just stayed consistent with our sound. And I think people like that. So.
And what surprised me when you guys put some remastered songs on the new 25th anniversary album, I thought, why are you touching these? These sound so great as they are. And then I listened to them and I'm like, okay, you've somehow found a way to take it up a notch. I don't know how you did it, but you somehow found a way to make them even sonically better than they already were. Was it a little bit nerve-wracking saying, how can we make this better, picking some of these songs?
Well, actually on the mastering side, it can just remember we were recording back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And as you said, the production, this type of music was sort of in its infancy, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And everybody was producing for, CDs and cassettes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so remastering actually gave us an opportunity to look at new formats. And so the remastering works far better with the streaming services and because just the way that it's set up. So it gave us a real opportunity to sort of bring it up to where things are right now sonically. And I think that's part of the reason we did it, because we want it to sound as good as it can in the different formats.
So when you guys were first recording, like your first EP, was that recorded on analog?
Well,
like
actually, no, it was actually recorded. This was right back at the beginning. I don't know if you remember the change from having to go into the big studios with the 2-inch tape to ADATs. And so we had I'd recorded a record with my rock band on ADATs, and the big Alanis Morissette Jagged Little Pill was recorded on blackface ADAT, so everyone was starting to use those. And so it was digital on tape. So it was digital tape, but it was still digital. Mm-hmm. But it was really hard to work with back in the day. Paul will remember this too. I mean, you push record and you have to wait a few seconds for all the tapes to lock up. And, when we were bringing samples up, it would take like 3 or 4 minutes for every sample to come up. Yeah. And all the programs we had, like Logic and things like that, were clunky as hell. We're working in DOS, and it was really hard. But we did mix it analog, so we mixed it on an analog board. But it was we were recording digitally.
Yeah, I specifically remember using Logic. One of the earlier versions of Logic was an amazing program, and it always has been. But back then, I think it was like the manual. The instruction manual on how to use it was translated from German, because I think it was a German program, maybe still is originally. And it was a really not a good translation. So it was really hard to understand. So we were it was really a huge learning curve.
It was actually hilarious how bad the translation was, actually. And what was really kind of interesting, because we used a Mackie board to mix the record, and it wasn't automated, so we had to do it manually, analog. But the Mackie manual was incredible, and then the Logic manual was terrible. So it was just these inconsistencies. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, Logic, it was amazing. It's always been amazing, but it was. I mean, nowadays I'm sure the manual's like really understandable, but back then it was just, I remember I couldn't. It was a lot of just testing and trying different things with it, and we did get it, but it was just like it was a learning curve for sure. And it was our first recording program we ever used, I think. So it was like we just didn't have any background in that. So
thank God for Mark Hensley. Mark Hensley was our wizard with that stuff.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, every time that you daisy chain an additional ADAT, you lose a track, right? So you didn't get 8 tracks per ADAT. You really got 7, except for the master.
No, I think you got the 8 tracks with the BRC. It was just the length of time. Like we had 3 ADATs running, oh man, it was just like, the first one locks up and the second one locks up and the third locks up. It was like, oh, you're killing me, right? But it's so funny now, because like samples come up instantly. Everything's in the box in the computer. It's such a joy working in the digital world now. It's so much easier. But it's nothing. There's something to be said about having to dig for everything. We had to dig, Paul and I, for everything back then. So.
It is one of those things where when you have to work harder for it, you get a better result a lot of times. And I think it's so easy to become complacent in, I'll just use this sample because I know it. I've got all these other ones I can use, but here's this one, I'm comfortable with it. It'll work. But I struggle with that myself. In fact, I really fought transferring to digital for a long time because I was an analog mixer. And I'm used to having to, do 10 different things with 10 different fingers and try and make it work before automated faders. But once I made that transition, I thought, that I just wasted the last 2 years of my life,
Yeah.
But you guys have always gotten a great sound in the studio. You also have had incredible artwork on your albums. Every one of them is just stunning, especially Purity. That one's my favorite. It's just, I want to walk into that world and be there and experience what it's got to offer. How did you guys hook up with Gil Bruvel?
Well, do you mind if I tell the story, Paul? Is that right?
I'll go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just seem to be talking more, so you can jump in. When we put out our EP Introspection, and at the time I was doing a lot of work shopping artists around the world, and I was in Meet M, and we met a guy named Mehdi Amadi from X.25 in the Bay Area, and he fell in love with our music, and he actually put the EP out in the States before Higher Octave, and he was actually at a party, and he saw like an art book, and it was Gil Bruvel. And he suddenly went, he had this epiphany. He said, "This is Mythos. Like this is a match." And so he was the one who contacted Bruvel for us and sort of set it up. And then, of course, when he took his catalog to Higher Octave, they fell in love with this match. And so all of our records have had Gil Bruvel artwork, and it's just the most stunning artwork. If I encourage all of your listeners to just go to his website, gilbruvel.com, and just see all of his work. And he doesn't just do surrealistic paintings; he does sculptures, he does all sorts of stuff. So we've had this amazing relationship with Gil for this whole time, and we're just so grateful. And the interesting thing is, Reality of a Dreamer is actually the name of the work.
Oh,
yeah. So it's actually it went beyond that for Reality of a Dreamer, because that piece, that art, is called Reality of a Dreamer. We got special permission from Gil to use that because it just seemed like such a perfect match for the album. So anyway, want to add anything, Paul?
Yeah, like Bruvel stuff. I've always been a huge fan ever since we first found out about having it on our first major release with Higher Octave was, I guess, the first one that they actually got the license, one of Bruvel's works. That was with the Mythos release, and it's been just incredible to have such a great match with our album artwork, and it's amazing that every one of our albums since then, because our first couple of albums we did before Higher Octave didn't have Bruvel yet, but everyone since then has had Bruvel, and it's just like, it's this amazing consistency, and it really is like ties our albums together almost, having his artwork on all of them, and pretty much most of them have a woman, and then we use a lot of male vocals, so that ties it in really well too.
It does. And I really go back and forth with the concept of, I hate that music needs a visual representation because it really should be the music itself. But I also understand, to get people to listen to the music, you need to have something eye-catching to make them go, "Oh, what is this?" And it worked, because when I went into that New Age store and I'm looking at the 12 or 16 different album covers that they had on that machine, yours was the one that stood out most. A lot of them were just a color wash, or a little angel in red with a blue background, just very simplistic. We kind of threw this together, and yours was like, these guys take their music seriously. They really went in and did something valuable here. And while I think it had an impact, because yours was the first one I wanted to listen to. So as much as I hate it, it is so vital to have that.
Well, I sure miss the listening post days. We used to. I mean, the industry's changed so much over the last 25 years, but we were so fortunate back in the day that Higher Octave was able to get us on these in-store listening posts and in-store play opportunities right out of the gate, and it just makes such a difference. As you said, if people have a chance to hear it, then they can fall in love with it and then buy it, and then so that really helped drive sales and get people interested. And you're right. People do. We are visual human beings, and so I do feel that having that initial visual is important, especially if it matches the music. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen album covers where you're like, "Oh, that looks cool," and then you listen to it and it's like, "What? That doesn't match the music." Right. And so that's why we're so lucky to have Bruvel, because it does. It's just such a great match.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and listening posts have been huge for us. I mean, they won't really have them anymore, but like, for example, when we were with Higher Octave, when they released each of our albums they released, they would, I think, do a deal with Tower Records where in every single Tower Records store in the US, we would get a month on a listening post or something. Wow. And then sometimes it was even 2 months. And then that led to other successes. Like, for example, Reality of a Dreamer has a track called Requiem, which was used in the 2000 Victoria's Secret fashion show. Wow. So that was probably our biggest placement we've ever had with our music. We've had some, we've had some TV and film stuff, but nothing like no blockbuster films or anything huge. But that's probably the biggest thing. And I remember the story. I don't know if you remember this, Bob, but I think the story with that was the VP of Victoria's Secret was in New York in a Tower Records store and heard our album on a listening post and then wanted to use it for the fashion show. Mm-hmm. So that's how we actually got that placement from a listening post. And the other thing about listening posts is like our music sounds really good in headphones. I think that our genre of music sounds better in headphones. So it's like you're getting people to listen to it right away in headphones. And it just was, that was probably one of our earliest, best marketing things we had going for us, I would say.
I love stories like that. I love when things just happen organically, and you're right. Those listening posts were great, but I will agree with the headphones. There is some music that it sounds better in speakers. Like I think rock and roll a lot of times just sounds better when it's filling the room. And I think new age music sounds better when it's like you're in it, you're inside it. And especially with the reverbs that you guys use, I think so much of that gets lost in a bigger room. Mm-hmm. Maybe in a theater it would be okay, but as a personal listener, like if I were to put it on my stereo and have the speakers, I think sonically it would sound better if it was right here where I could feel more immersed in it.
Right.
Because I think that's the thing with new age music. A lot of it is that immersion experience, feeling like you're inside the song, at least for me. And I started out listening to guys like Patrick O'Hearn, who had played with Missing Persons and then went on his own and started doing some new age albums. And that's how I found the genre. And then you guys were probably the second or third band that I found, and just immediately I was like, these guys are amazing, and I just bought everything that you had. I'm like, I want more, But we were talking before the show started. You told me something interesting about Pandora, so I want to tell my American audience that if you guys have wanted to interact with Mythos on Pandora, they would love to interact with you, but they can't. Why can't you guys interact on Pandora?
You want the lawyer to take this one, Paul?
Sure.
Well, it's one of these things where different jurisdictions have different rules in terms of what streaming services can do and how they pay royalties and their structure. And unfortunately, Pandora's model doesn't work in the Canadian environment. And so Spotify's fine, Apple Music's fine, others, Deezer, are fine, but Pandora doesn't work here, so they can't comply with our rules around how they pay their royalties and all of that stuff. So unfortunately, we can't even log in to check to see. And I know we've had significant followings on Pandora, so it's really frustrating for Paul and me because we'd love to be able to interact the way we do with our Spotify playlist fans and things like that, or Apple Music. But yeah, Pandora, it's a bit frustrating for us, I must say.
I had no idea. So thank you for letting me know. And so for you guys in America, if you guys have Pandora, but you also have Spotify, maybe go to Spotify. And that might be the place. Interestingly, on Reality of a Dreamer, according to the Wikipedia for you guys, you were nominated for a West Coast Music Award in the category of techno.
I know, right?
That's
I know.
I had to laugh because I don't know how this would. Maybe that was just the closest category they had. They didn't have a new age category at the time.
Yeah.
Or was it called electronic or something?
Yeah, electronic techno. Yeah.
I think the first one we were nominated was actually, no joke, it was rap/electronic. Do you remember that, Paul? And that was the first. Yeah. And it was weird because there was a band I was representing called the Rascals, who were like a very heavy rap band, who were like in the same category as me and Paul. And we were laughing so hard because, we're all buddies, but just no match genre, like not even like about as far away as you can get. Right. Yeah. So it's sometimes that's one of the problems when you do music that isn't in a pigeonhole like that. You can't pigeonhole our music easily. I mean, new age is a catch-all, I guess you would say, but we always considered ourselves electroacoustic, or people like to label us or label artists, but we've always tried to defy labels if we can, and just create ethereal, beautiful music that doesn't have any boundaries and is go cross genre, and we just try to pull on everything. So, but new age, whatever you call it, as long as you listen to us, we don't care.
Well, and really, it kind of goes back to the concept of the album artwork. It's a way to draw in at least a certain category of fans that are looking for maybe ambient music or instrumental music or something like that. And I'm the same. I hate labels too, especially now that they're like so subdivided and then subdivided after that it's just, how do you find anything you want anymore?
Well, yeah, with 60,000 tracks being released every day on Spotify. Yeah. How do you find anything these days?
Yeah. So I'm curious how you guys go about writing together. Because I write most of my stuff alone, so I don't have anyone to play off of, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time. But with you guys, does one of you come up with an idea and you present it to the other one and you develop it together, or how do you do that, Paul?
Yeah, like a lot of it, exactly like you said, like a lot of the times, like it'll start with either for me a guitar riff, or from Bob a piano melody, and we'll develop it from there. I mean, that one track, for example, Planinata we have, which is I think our biggest track on Spotify. It's got the most streams. It was from hearing, I was at the library in the world music section, and it was a Bulgarian folk melody, and I heard it and I was like, it was a solo vocal. It's like, oh, that's so cool. And then I brought it to Bob and he's like, yeah, let's make a song of it. And we've built a track around that. So that one was kind of different, but usually it's just like, one of us has an idea, and sometimes in our more recent, I guess, stuff we've done together, we've done it more distance, with COVID and everything. And so when we're recording that album with COVID, and so that would be like more like Bob would do a composition that needed maybe a guitar melody and some kind of melody in the B section or something else, and I would add to it, but at first, for like in our earlier days, we would actually sit together with a guitar and the piano and an actual Bob's like, Bob still has a baby grand piano. So we would, that's how we would write very organically in the earlier days. Yeah.
I think totally right, Paul. I think from a writing point of view, some of the best stuff we've done is just sitting with a piano and an acoustic guitar, and yes, there's electronic bits, and yes, there's the soaring vocals and the orchestration and all of that stuff. But at the core, we've always tried to have, key melodic development with our core instruments, which is acoustic piano and acoustic guitar. And sometimes it goes totally a different direction, and that's fine, right? But that's I think that's where the magic has always been, is just Paul and me sitting down with our acoustic instruments and creating. And yeah, it's changed, but
you can always change a piano out for a different sound later if you think that it serves the song better. But to have that foundation, the instruments that you're most comfortable with and that you guys work well with each other with, and it makes the most sense. But one question that I really like to ask artists, and I'd like to see what both of you think. When do you call a song done? Start with you, Bob.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't think there's an artist who ever puts a song out and goes, oh, I should have changed that part. Right. It's really hard when you hear, I still hear pieces that we've done like 20 years ago. And I'm like, oh, I could have brought that bit up a little bit there or here or there. So, is it ever done? Probably not. It's like any artist, but I think you can definitely get a feeling when all the parts start coalescing, and you're like, okay, this is feeling good, and all the bits are where they need to be. There's definitely, and the thing too is what's really great is Paul and I have a really good relationship with going through the mixes, Paul listen and have, what about this? So we always bounce stuff back and forth. Mm-hmm. So that it was really great too when we had people like Sean Pierce, who was a third party mixing it. And then Paul and I could sit down with Sean or Mark Hensley or others. I've been doing more of the mixing in the last decade or so. I feel more comfortable doing that, having learned from these professionals.
Sure.
But we learned a lot, but being able to work with people, and I always found with the mixing engineers that we worked with, is they always brought something to the table, like bringing it up another level. We haven't worked with anybody who hasn't done that. So it's we usually get pretty excited. I think Paul, remember we'd go into the Sean Pierce mixes, and it was just like, whoa, awesome.
Yeah. Sean Pierce was amazing. So correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. Did Sean Pierce work with us on Purity and Eternity?
Yeah.
And just those two, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Sean Pierce is, like Bob was saying before, he's now a very successful film composer, doing Netflix series and stuff. But he's also a Berkeley trained jazz musician and a real technical studio whiz guy, amazing mixer. So back when he was still living in Vancouver, we got him for those two albums to mix them. And he didn't just mix, like he would, he would add a couple beats and stuff. And if he felt like it was like, and he was like really amazing to have, because he was incredibly technically proficient and very creative in the way he mixed. And he brought our stuff, definitely to another level. It was amazing, Yeah,
so, I'm always aspiring to the Sean Pierce mix. That's my goal. Can I make it to Sean or not?
Right. Well, so Paul, when do you think a song is done?
I guess like when there's, our usual format is A section, B section, A section, B section, bridge, and then A section, B section, out. So I guess for me, one good thing is when you write the song with just the acoustic instruments, you're not bogged down by the technology. So you can really focus on the melodies and the harmony, of the music and the composition itself. So that's like our first stage. And once we have like the harmony and enough melodies for the A section, B section, and the bridge, then we're ready to go record it. And then it becomes a question of production, like adding some vocals, the bass. Renee Wurst is amazing. We've used him for bass. Yes. And his partner Jennifer Scott, one of the better jazz singers in Canada, as well as Christine Duncan and we've had some other amazing singers. My friend John Bottomley, who's a Canadian folk singer, sang on a couple of our tracks, and that was a huge treat. So then once the production feels full enough, sometimes we've actually had cases where we put too much stuff in a track, and there's just too many tracks, and it's too busy. And that happened, I think, for example, with didn't that happen with that Ascent track, Bob?
Totally. Well, remember
like,
we did two variations of it, one with lyrics, one without, and it was just so much. It was just like, I don't know, it was way too
and
much.
I loved
and we started
that track.
Yeah.
But when it was mixed and the end, I was like, there's just, man, there's too much. You can't focus on one thing. There's just too much going on. We overproduced that track, I think.
Yeah. No.
And it just kind of lost some of its magic. I still like it, but it didn't like when we were writing and at first recording that one, I was like, this is going to be so amazing for us. And then we finished producing it. We got it mixed. And I'm like, oh, it's there's too much on it.
The demo was better. The demo was better.
Yeah, I think it was. It was better because it wasn't so busy. We didn't try to just stuff so much stuff into it.
Yeah, I know.
So that was a disappointment for me because I thought that track could have been huge for us. And it never really was as big as I thought it should have been. And
especially with the video. I mean, we got Neil Blomkamp, who's the guy who you talk about Ascent, right? I mean, we got Neil Blomkamp, who is the director for District 9, it was one of his first. He just was in Vancouver trying to do CGI stuff, and he did a video for us. And so we had a pretty good. We thought this was a really big track for us, and you're right. It might have been better to have backed off a little bit and just let it breathe. And sometimes that's the trick, is letting pieces breathe and not overproducing them. Yeah.
Well, that's the double-edged sword with this style of music, right? Because if you take, like, Bob, when you were in your band, and you take, okay, we have guitar, bass, drums, keys, vocals, and it's very simple. Maybe we'll add a couple of layers of synths or whatever. But when you get into music that's really more of an open canvas and there are no restrictions, it's so tempting to go, what if we just did this? Oh, what we could try? And you're not removing anything to leave room for those other things. It does tend to get very overproduced. I've done that myself. And it's hard to produce yourself and say, I need to have the discipline to know not when to stop, but when to remove something else to leave room for this other thing that's more important, or I think serves the song better. Those are tough choices to make sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's why having a third-party mixer, someone like Sean or Mark, it helps, because fresh ears at that point can be really helpful. In the case of Ascent, though, it was sort of the other way around. I think the mix that we did probably could have been the album mix in hindsight, but hindsight's 2020, right?
Right. Well, I want to ask you guys about a couple of specific songs that were pre-Reality of a Dreamer that are a couple of my favorites. If you recall, from the album Purity, Icarus is such an amazing journey. And I think that's the thing about your music, is that your songs are songs, but they're journeys. I feel like I'm going on a ride with you with each song. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to your music. It's not just a bunch of stuff that happened. It's an experience. And Icarus, it builds and it builds and it gets more intense with the piano with every pass. Just such a beautiful thing. But I think that's one where I would have been tempted, had I written that song, to just keep adding things and making it ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it had to at some point peak. So, I let it just peak, and then that was that. And so I think with Icarus, it's really wild, because sometimes with songs, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, but it was one of these pieces. They actually, this is no joke, a high school drumline did an arrangement of it.
Really?
No joke, right?
Wow.
Which is really cool. I mean, you'd never know where pieces can go, and who you're going to inspire. And so it's one of these things that pieces have a life of their own. And I think Icarus is probably one of those that was never intended. I mean, I think Paul and there's other pieces that were bigger when they first came out, and then some like Plananata or Icarus or Surrender or some others, sort of in the digital world, some people fell in love with it and started putting it on their own videos, and then all of a sudden it's shooting up in the playlists. And so it can be very organic in the streaming world. So that's one of those ones where it was a bit, I think, surprising for Paul and I, how it had this long life that when it started out, it's much bigger now than when it started out, which is really, it's interesting how songs have a life of their own.
Well, it's got a great energy to it for one, and then every pass you're like, okay, what's the piano going to do on the next one? You're just like got that anticipation and curiosity, and you have to go to the next pass. And then when it's over, you just want to hear it again. Even just from the beginning, just that little melody and that just the kind of, I feel the clock ticking back and forth. I feel the metronome, and you just can't help but to be drawn in. But that, I think, for me, is the pull for you guys, because I feel like that with all of your songs, every one of them. There's a simplicity to them, and there's a beauty in that simplicity. No matter how much you layer it, you can feel the core foundation of the song, and that doesn't get lost, which I think with a lot of artists, they tend to just bury the foundation of the song in all the other things that they're trying to show off.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think the piano, guitar, bass basis of the piece and the melodic development is so important, because that is the anchor for everything. And then it's sort of like when you write for a vocalist, everything should be supporting the vocal. And I think that's the way we look at all the other instrumentation, unless it becomes a melodic part, of course, like Jennifer or Christine. It's like, I don't think Paul and I have ever lost sight of how important that sort of core melodic bass is to everything.
Right. And it definitely works for your style. Absolutely. The other song I wanted to ask you about, another one of my favorites. In fact, when your band name pops into my head, the first song that I go to is The Odyssey from the album Mythos. This is it's dark without being dark. There's like, it rides that edge of having it be like this really melodramatic song, but it also doesn't feel melodramatic at the same time. What do you remember about putting this one together?
Paul, you want to take this one?
To be honest, I don't remember too much about that one. I want to just refresh.
Remember, Scott, this was
recording that one.
This was 25 years ago for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So
absolutely.
It's like a lifetime ago. And the thing is interesting too, is that Paul and I have rarely played live. So one of the things we asked Higher Octave early on was, do you want us to tour? We're happy to tour if you want us to. No, we got listening posts. We got we're a mail order company. We're fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. We got you. And so we're like, oh, okay. And all right. So, we did some TV shows, and we did a few, on air things and some live concerts. But the thing is, when you don't play the pieces like a lot of bands do over and over again, it's one of these things. You produce it, you release it, and then you move on to the next one. Right. So it's an interesting position to be in.
And a lot of songs, when they don't have like a chorus to tie into the title of the song, like I'll go back and look at songs that I've written and go, The Shattered Room, what was that? Like I know I wrote it and I know I liked it, but I can't remember which song that is, in conjunction to some of my other songs. So it does. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. This album, though, Reality of a Dreamer, one thing that you guys had mentioned, Renee, on bass, and I love a fretless bass. I am a sucker for a good fretless bass, and it is all over this album. Was that a choice that you guys made, or was that a choice that he comes in and says, what if I played fretless on this?
No. Renee and I go way back, because he used to be in a jazz band called Skywalk back in the day, this amazing jazz fusion band in the 70s and 80s. And I was sort of in awe of this band and sort of in awe of Renee as a bass player. So, and he actually came to my high school and did some tutoring and stuff. And so just hearing him play, and so just being able to get him on the album is like, it was just such a honor, really. And and he was at that time, and probably still is, one of the top session players in Vancouver. And so we were really lucky to get him. But just when you hear the fretless, it just works so well with what we're doing, and it's so melodic. And so if you hear sometimes, like in November, for example, he does a bass solo in the bridge, and we just let him go. And as time went on, we did a lot more writing for Renee, bass lines, which I think he appreciated, because I think we put a little bit more on him early on to sort of, develop the bass lines and things like that. But there's something about the fretless bass that just matches what we're doing so well, and just it's so smooth and melodic. And Paul, you want to add to that at all? Paul,
What's that?
Do you have any thoughts on Renee?
Oh, I mean, yeah, he's amazing. He's just got this soul, out at his playing. And it kind of matches his personality because he's kind of an easygoing guy, really friendly, nice guy. And his playing is just so warm and just beautiful. And it's been, he's a gem to have for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And even on Reality of the Dreamer, from the opening track, Alchemy, he shines right off the bat. And it definitely does add a warmth, because as we all know, as working in the mixing side of things, working with these kinds of sounds, it can be very difficult in the digital world to give them that warmth. And I think that the fretless really helps bring out some of the warmth in the music as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Alchemy is another one of my favorite songs from you guys. It just sets such a great tone for the album overall. It just says you're going to take a journey with this album, and every song on it is just fantastic. My last question for you guys is, so you're still together, you're still working together. Can we expect another album?
Well, we'll see. I mean, one of the challenges, Scott, is when we put stuff out, we want to make sure that we're adding to the story, right? And we want to make sure that we're relevant and that we're doing stuff that people really want to get. So we've been sort of trying to be very picky and careful about putting things out to make sure we have that sort of level of production and level of writing. So I know I'm anxious to continue doing more, and but it's gotta be right. And the other thing too is, we don't want to do more of the same. I think that's one of the challenges we have, is that we do have a sound. We have a type of piece that we've done, like the type of development and production that we've done over the years. I want to make sure that when we do something new, that we're actually adding to the story. And so it gets harder as it goes on. I mean, one of the things about Reality of a Dreamer, which is interesting, is that it's an interesting story, because when Hieroctave put out Mythos, the first album, it was actually two albums in one. So they were able to pick the best of our two first releases, independent releases, and make Mythos, and that ended up being a big album for us, the biggest album for us. So when we delivered Reality of a Dreamer, it was tough, because your sophomore album, I mean, there's all these expectations after the first one. Right. And at first, actually, Hieroctave was like, I don't know. We nearly didn't get it released, right? Wow. And yeah, I know, right? Mm-hmm. And it was one of these things where there was a bit of humming and hawing. And we put it all together. We put the artwork together. We sent it down, and we worked with Dan Celine and the team down there. And it took a bit for them to fall in love, but it's always difficult following up something like 3 or 4 years of work, and now you got a year to do the next one, right? So that was a real challenge for us. And so when we do new music, Paul and I want to make sure that we are adding to the the and I think that's our challenge now after 25 years.
Well, and I think that you think about a band, you had all those years to develop those songs under no pressure, and now you're under a time crunch. You have people with expectations of you. You look at a band like Guns N' Roses; they had years to make Appetite for Destruction perfect, and then it comes out, it's a huge success, and now the record company's like, "All right, go in the studio and record another album." They're like, "Well, wait a minute, this took us years, to make this."
Yeah,
that is a huge amount of pressure. So I understand some hesitation there. What do you think, Paul?
I think the same. Like, I think if we do some new stuff, just really, we really have to dig deep and do something like that is still Mythos but different, because we've done so much of our genre already. So we're reaching a point where if we just kind of do more tracks, I mean, the last album we did, there was one track that actually was really quite different because it used electric guitar, and I think we'd maybe used electric guitar before once in the past, and Bob his son wrote that track with us, and it turned out really amazing. I was like, wow, this is different. It's like it's still Mythos, but it's got a really fresh kind of sound to it. So it'd have to be something, we'd have to find something new like that would just, and we'd have to keep the piano and the nylon string guitar to keep it Mythos and the vocals, but it would just have to be different. And this is, I think, something that's really difficult for artists that have had like multiple albums out of the same genre, because I just wouldn't want people to listen to it and go, well, it sounds kind of like their other stuff, but it's maybe not quite as good as, because like you were saying, like, with the old stuff, we back then we did have a lot more time. We spent a lot more time. I mean, we were more, it was more like our job back then, whereas now it's sort of just a part-time thing for us, and we're doing other stuff in our lives. So it would have to be, we'd have to really, to use the expression Bob I've always used, we'd have to really dig deep. And Bob, you've always used that expression for the melodies and harmonies that we come up with, but I think in this case it would be also the direction we go and the sound, and we'd have to really find something that's still Mythos, but that is different. It's hard to explain, but it's
you see our dilemma, Scott? You see our dilemma?
I do. And
you probably feel that too.
I was on a live stream podcast last night for the band Van Halen, and one of the things that we were talking about is that fans tend to get, this is what I want the band to be as a fan. So if you just keep producing the same thing, you'll please certain fans, and other fans will be like, well, they're not growing. And then if you do something different, like let's say you made it slightly jazzier version on your next album, then you'll have the fans that are like, oh, I really like this. This is an exciting new direction. You'll have the other fans that are like, well, I'm a diehard fan from the beginning, and I don't like this new thing because it's not what I want them to be. It's such a difficult thing, but I think whatever you guys choose to do, whether you ever put out anything else or not, if you stick true to yourselves, if you're happy with the music that you're creating, it will have an audience, because people will feel that joy. If you're trying to force anything, I think it comes out in the music.
I think that's so true. And it's so funny you should say that, because I think right back to the beginning, when I had this sort of toxic ending to my rock band experience and with the rock industry, and part of the reason why it was so great getting into Mythos was because of that. So we didn't set out to write for an industry or write for a genre or write for radio or write for anybody except ourselves. Yeah. And I think that's ultimately why I connected with so many people, is because we actually were creating from a space of, we just want to create something beautiful. That's our only criteria, freedom, really. Right? That was our criteria, right? That's it.
Yeah. Right.
It was like a freedom, I think, back then.
It freed us.
We just, when you get it more established, you just don't have that anymore. Because you've got, fans that have
expectations.
And Scott, if you want, I could just quickly talk about, I did quickly refresh the Odyssey. So I do remember about that one. That one started as a guitar tremolo. Tremolo is a technique where you're playing your thumb and then these three fingers. Let me just get my hand here. So over and over, thumbs going up and down the strings, and these three fingers are going on the. It started off as a guitar little tremolo piece I wrote that's very Italian, I think. It sounds like, to me, I remember when I was writing it, I thought, oh, this is very Italian sounding. And so that was what we started with that track. And then we added, I think Bob added a B section that had a bunch of choral samples and stuff. And so that's how that one came about. And and then Alchemy was, that's actually one of my favorites too. I just remember that one has sort of more of a guitar melody in the A section, and then the B section, it's got that really amazing piano melody.
Yeah.
And I remember when Mark Hensley, I believe, mixed that one, because he mixed that album, and he put this reverb on the piano. And it was just, when I first heard it, I was like, that is the most beautiful reverb I've ever heard.
Yes.
Because it's just this da dun 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 da da, and it just gives it this huge, it's a huge open space reverb. And that really made that track come alive and just made it incredible. And I think that's why it was the first track on the album. I'm pretty sure it was the first track on the album. I think maybe Higher Octave wanted it that way, because that was, I think, their choice for the first track.
It made it very haunting in a sense.
Yeah,
which I thought was really
it's
cool.
Almost like it's almost like I remember there was one reverb in one of the reverb units he used to have, Bob, called Underwater Cathedral. And I loved that one. They always had these names for the
weird names.
Still do, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And then Alchemy's on Spotify, it's our third most streamed track. So it's it's definitely always been one of my favorite as well.
Well, and
I guess oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say what I love about that, Paul, going off of what you're saying about the simplicity of the piano, the guitar is simple too. I mean, there's a nice quick double pick at the beginning, and they're both very simple pieces with some nice background, but it just brings an elegance to the song, but that reverb really brings out the piano. And I think that's one of the things that is magical to your music is just the way it all blends together, and it feels like it's one sound, even though it's different instruments. It's just blended so well.
The other thing
when I first heard that reverb, I was like, when it was we first got the mix that Mark did, I don't know if you were the same, Bob, but I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was just, it's probably one of the most like huge, amazing moments of listening to a first mix I've had with our stuff, I think, was that reverb on the piano.
The interesting thing about this record too, which I thought was neat, is because we always used electronic beats, but we brought Frank Baker in, who's a drummer, but he ended up adding like drum elements, live drum elements. So if you hear the hi-hat work, it's really interesting, especially in Alchemy. It's really interesting. It's something that would be nearly impossible. Well, I mean, a good programmer could do it, but man, there's nothing like a live hi-hat work with someone who knows what they're doing. I think the dynamics
are definitely there on the hi-hat.
Yeah. So, and other percussive bits that Frank was able to add, especially to Alchemy. I think it's always been that combination of electronic and organic together is really what we're about. And so we were experimenting on trying to get electronic elements and marry them with the live element as well. So it's always been a bit of an experiment in progress, and we'll keep hopefully experimenting for years to come.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think Reality of a Dreamer is the only album where we had an actual drum kit and drummer. We've had on Purity and Eternity, we had a lot of percussion.
Yeah, Pepe Danza, that was really cool.
Percussion guy come in. But this is the only album, I think, Bob, right, where we had an actual drum kit, a drum set being played, and it really worked. I think, was it maybe Mark Hensley who knew Frank Baker and recommended him to us? I can't remember. Did you know him, Bob?
No, I knew Frank. Mark knew Frank. Yeah, he was.
Oh, you knew him. Okay, yeah.
Don't you remember his dad, Frank Baker? He used to have the restaurant in West Van.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Frank Baker Jr. Anyway,
nice.
Right.
We digress.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for taking some time out to talk with me. In the next episode, I'll be doing the review of Reality of the Dreamer. It's such a beautiful album. I mean, I love all your guys' albums, but this is the one that it's like the first one I keep going back to because it was my initiation to you guys, and it just has such a special place in my heart. I want to thank you guys for creating the beautiful music that you've done. Whatever you choose to do from here, I'll take light in knowing that anything that you put out, you're doing because it comes from that foundation, that you believe that this is, the music that you should be putting out. And regardless of what direction it goes, and if you guys become a polka band, I'll be there to listen to it.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. You take care and keep in touch, and just keep doing what you do. And I wish for your great continued success.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Bye.